This happened just over a month ago. I was hanging out at my friend Jaden's house with some other guys. There were 5 or 6 of us there. I lived kind of far away, but everyone else lived in his neighborhood. I borrowed my dad's car to get there. My friends all had a few drinks, but I had to drive, so I couldn't. At around midnight, we called it a night, and I hopped into the car and said goodbye to my friends. My dad always lets me borrow his car, but he asks that I put some gas in to make up for what I use. A fair rule. I was driving down one of the larger streets in my town. There were stores and restaurants on both sides. All were closed for the night, though. It was quite deserted. I noticed a gas station on the right, and I figured it was as good a place as any to fill up. I pulled into the farthest pump. As I got out, I noticed a car at the station. It was the only other one there. I looked over to it as I was filling up my car. It was dark blue, with tinted windows. I couldn't see anybody inside, but the headlights were on, so I figured someone was there. As I was getting back into the driver's seat, I saw the car pull up next to me. The front window rolled down. The driver was wearing a mask. I couldn't see his face. He didn't say anything, and neither did I. It was really awkward. I tried to start my car and get out of there, but I fumbled with the ignition. I looked up and saw that the car was still there, waiting for me. I finally got my car started and began driving. After a few minutes, I looked back and I saw that the car was behind me. My first thought was to drive to the police station. That's what my mom always told me to do in a situation like this. I thought I remembered how to find it, but after a while, I found myself lost and the car was still on my tail. I felt like I was driving in circles, lost in the middle of nowhere. I tried to keep calm. The fear was overwhelming. I had meandered all the way into a very rural area. There were farm fields on either side, with tall corn stalks closing in on the road. I felt trapped, and I was completely alone with that guy behind me. I slowed my car and called 911. The operator answered. I tried to describe where I was, but all I could see was darkness. I couldn't see any landmarks or signs. The operator tried to help me, but I could hear the frustration in her voice. I knew I was in trouble. Suddenly, my headlights fell upon a large grain tower that had the name Miller painted on the side. I excitedly told the operator, and she seemed to think that it was enough for the police to find me. I kept driving for several more minutes. That's when I saw a flicker of light in the distance. It was a police car. I honked the horn, hoping that they would see me. The police car approached, and the other car fled. I felt really relieved when I noticed that. The police officer got out of his car and asked me if I was okay. I told him everything, and we talked for a few minutes. He asked me if I wanted to press charges, but I declined. I just wanted to get home and forget the whole thing. The car was gone anyway. I didn't know if they could find him. And if they did, he would have just lied and said nothing happened. When I finally got home, I collapsed on the couch and tried to calm down. My heart was still racing, and I felt like I was in a daze. I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep that night, so I turned on the TV and tried to distract myself. Then I went into my room and played some video games. I ended up going to sleep when the sun was coming up. Weeks later, I was watching the news, and I saw a story about a man who had been attacked and robbed at a gas station. The description of the car and the driver matched the one that had followed me, and I'm pretty sure it was the same guy. It was a cold winter evening, and I was working at the gas station in my town. The gas station was a small one, with a few pumps, a small shop, and a restroom. I spent most of my time inside the shop, attending to customers and trying to keep warm. As the night grew darker, the gas station grew quieter. The occasional car would pull in to fill up on gas or grab a snack, but for the most part, it was just me, all alone. It wasn't until 2 men walked in. One was tall and thin, with a pale face and high cheekbones. The other was about average height, with long gray hair and a baseball hat. They both wore dirty jackets and pants, and their hair was unkempt. I tried to be polite, but I was wary of them. They asked me for directions to the nearest town. I pointed them in the right direction, hoping they would leave soon. But they lingered, eyeing me up and down, and asking me personal questions. I tried to be short with them, but they wouldn't take the hint. Finally, they bought some cigarettes and left, climbing into an old beat-up car parked outside. I breathed a sigh of relief as they drove away, but little did I know that my troubles were far from over. After my shift ended, I headed outside to wait for the bus. The night air was crisp, and my breath fogged up in front of me. Suddenly, that same old car, with those two men driving, pulled up beside me. They offered me a ride, but I refused, telling them that I preferred to wait for the bus. But they persisted, and started to make me feel really uncomfortable. That's when I noticed a look in their eyes. It was a look that sent shivers down my spine. I told them I was not interested, and then I walked away as fast as I could. I was a block away when I looked back. The car was still there, and I could also see that the bus was fast approaching. I ran to the nearest stop and jumped on just in time. I knew that something was not right about those guys. I thought about calling the police, but I decided against it, not wanting to make a fuss. Over the coming weeks, I noticed that car lurking around the gas station. They seemed to just circle the neighborhood, and I had no idea what they were doing. I try not to go out there alone when those guys are around, and so far, that seemed to help. This is a really scary story that happened to me. I was driving home from visiting family out of state. It was late and I was tired, but I had to keep going. The road stretched out before me like a black ribbon, and the only sound was the hum of my car engine. I never could listen to music while driving. I find it too distracting. I was lost in my thoughts when I saw a gas station up ahead. I decided to pull over and get some coffee and snacks to help me stay awake. As I stepped out of the car, I felt a chill in the air. The gas station was small and isolated, with a flickering neon sign that read, "Open 24 hours." I walked inside, and I was immediately hit by the smell of gasoline and cigarettes. The store was dimly lit, with only a few fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. There was a man standing at the counter, with greasy hair and a stained t-shirt. He looked up as I walked in, and his eyes seemed to follow me as I made my way to the coffee machine. I poured myself a cup, then I grabbed a bag of chips and some beef jerky. I turned to leave, but the man was standing in front of me, blocking my way.
"Nice car you got there,"
he said, leering at me.
"Must have cost you a pretty penny."
I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. This guy was creepy, and I didn't want to stick around to find out what he wanted. "Yeah, it's a rental," I lied, trying to push past him. But he wasn't budging. He was staring at me with a hungry look in his eyes, like a predator sizing up his prey.
"You know, I could help you out,"
he said, leaning closer.
"I know a shortcut that'll get you home faster."
That guy was really scaring me at this point. Something about him made my skin crawl. I never even told him where I was going, so how could he know if there was a shortcut? "Sorry, not interested," I said, but he wasn't taking no for an answer. He reached out and grabbed my arm, pulling me closer to him. I could smell the stench of his breath, and I felt bile rising in my throat.
"Come on, man,"
he hissed.
"Don't be like that. Let me help you out."
I yanked my arm away and stumbled backwards. I could hear him laughing behind me as I ran out of the store and jumped into my car. I peeled out of that parking lot and back onto the highway. I was almost crying. But as I glanced in my rearview mirror, I saw the man coming out of the gas station and getting into his own car. He was following me. I tried to lose him, taking sharp turns and weaving in and out of traffic, but he was right behind me. his headlights glaring in my mirror like the eyes of a demon. Suddenly, he swerved towards me, trying to run me off the road. I felt my car spin out of control, and I braced myself for impact. But somehow, I managed to regain control and sped away from him. I didn't stop until I reached a small motel on the outskirts of town. I stumbled into the lobby and begged for a room. I was pretty sure I had lost him. The clerk looked me over with a suspicious eye, but eventually gave me a key and pointed me towards my room. I entered and collapsed on the bed. I don't remember how long I lay there, staring at the ceiling, before I finally fell asleep, but it was a long time. The last time I checked the clock, it was 4 in the morning. I woke up at 6, and I felt even more exhausted. I poked my head out of the room and scanned the area for that car. It was not there. I was relieved and got back into my car and drove the rest of the way home. I never saw that car again, and I never told anyone what happened until now. And I'll probably never talk about it again either. I worked at a gas station until my late 20s. This is about the scariest thing that ever happened while I worked there. I had gotten the job while I was in high school, and I kept doing it afterwards because there was not much else I could find. The nights paid a little better, so I always did that shift. I had been working there for years, serving customers without any significant events or disturbances. It was about 3 in the morning, and the store was empty, as was typical for that time of night. There was rarely more than a single customer in the store at a time for the duration of my shift. It was a cold night, and there was a light drizzle. I looked up to see a man walking towards the door. His face was obscured by a hooded sweatshirt. He pushed the door open and walked in. He looked suspicious, and I got nervous as he entered the store.
"Hey, buddy,"
he said, looking at me briefly. I got a quick look at his face, but not quite enough so that I could describe it. I tried to keep my cool, nodding silently. Then I went back to whatever I was reading, but something about him made me worried, and I couldn't help but feel that something was about to go wrong. He walked around the store aimlessly for several minutes. I was peeking at him periodically, nervous that he would try something. I could tell he wasn't going to buy anything. Our store didn't have the best selection. There was no way it would take anybody that long to make a decision. The tension built for another minute or two. Then the man walked up to the counter.
"Give me all the money in the cash register,"
he whispered. I was shocked, and I was unable to comprehend what was happening. I had never been robbed before, and the idea of someone threatening me with violence was beyond my wildest nightmares. "Okay, no problem," I said timidly. I opened the register and handed the money over. And then, just as quickly as he came in, he was gone, disappearing into the night like a phantom. I stood there in a trance. I had triggered the alarm while he was still in the store, so I knew it would not be long before the police arrived. They walked in the front door of the store, and I was still standing there terrified. I told them what happened, and then we looked at the security footage. It was all there, but there was not a clear shot of his face. The officers were confident that they would find the guy, based on what they had, though. I found out the next day that the guy was tracked down and arrested. He was still wearing the same clothes. Not the smartest criminal.